Whew. Let it out, boys. We're talking PFL versus Bellator champ series. They've been labeling this card as the champ versus champ from the two promotions. I want to say this much. I want to clarify before we jump into this card. That's not really the case. It is in certain matchups, but there's a lot going on with this card. So if you guys are a little confused with all that, I'll help clarify some of that. I'm very pleased to see that PFL acquired the Bellator roster. I think it really elevates the PFL as a whole, and I'm excited about that. And I will definitely be giving you guys a lot more prediction videos of these PFL cards. So I want to say that first and foremost. If you guys can, please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. You guys know I've been really working on some upgrades with the channel here. It means a lot to me. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about here. In the heavyweight matchup we have between Renan Ferreira and Ryan Bader, we're straight there. That is champ versus champ. Impa Kasingane versus Johnny Eblen. Now he's coming back down to the middleweight division where he used to fight in the UFC, but he just was fighting up at the light heavyweight division over in PFL. So he wasn't the PFL middleweight champion. Patricio Pitbull was set to take on Gabriel Alves Braga. Now that was after, unfortunately, Jesus Pinedo had to pull out of this fight. So Gabriel Alves Braga was jumping up the fight card. He was initially supposed to be taking on Aaron Pico. Now that fight gets scratched. Patricio Pitbull won't be fighting on the card. I was a little disappointed to see that. Jason Jackson, a fighter you guys know, I've met him before. Great dude who's really on fire right now. He was supposed to be taking on Magomed Kirimov, who unfortunately had to withdraw from this fight card. He pulled out back in January. That was a fight that I was much more anticipating than the new matchup of Ray Cooper III, a fighter that's bounced around weight classes a little bit. I feel he's a little undersized for the weight class, but he's a hard hitter. But again, that's another fight that has an asterisk next to it. How about the Bruno Capoloza versus Vadim Nemkov fight? Vadim Nemkov, the Bellator light heavyweight champion, who's returning back up to the heavyweight division. He's had some fights up there before. He's taken on Bruno Capoloza, who's been getting some W's. In fact, he just had a redemption knockout victory in his last fight, but that fight was overturned due to a positive drug test there, an asterisk there. Thiago Santos and Yoel Romero, two fighters that are up in age. I believe both of them are coming off losses there. Clay Collard in the lightweight matchup. Clay Collard just lost to OAM. OAM retires from the sport. AJ McKee, a fighter that was fighting in the featherweight division for some time. He's went up to the lightweight division now, but he wasn't the lightweight champion there. So just to clarify some things, all right, guys? Just wanted to keep you up to date what's going on with this card. And with no further ado, we're going to jump into some fight action here. Let's get to it. Before we jump up to the main card, let's take a quick glance at some of these prelim fights, some notable ones. Clarissa Shields makes a return back to the cage. She's back to fighting MMA. She's taking on Kelsey DeSantis, a fighter fighting out of MMA Masters down in Miami. Seems to be a little bit of a setup fight, and you can expect that Clarissa Shields will look better here performing in a mixed martial arts fight. She's obviously had more time to work on her overall game. She's the greatest women's boxer of all time, and I think that she will handle business. This isn't a fight that I'm looking to bet, quite honestly. She's a big-time favorite. We've seen her as high as... we've seen her as high as a -550 favorite. I'm not targeting any type of inside the distance or knockout props. It's just not really my style. I just don't know how much we can rely on her. I mean, for her to win inside the distance, she's a -160. It's just not my type of bet, to be quite frank with you guys there. If that's what you're targeting, maybe you think Shields goes out there and completely outclasses her. It's very, very possible, but I won't be betting on that. It's notable that Muhammad Ali's grandson is fighting on this card. He's making his pro debut, Biagio Ali Walsh. We've seen him fight as an amateur a little bit in the past, and he's making his pro debut. And, it obviously, it brings attention, right? That's why he's fighting on a card like this. Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest boxers of all time, one of the greatest boxing personalities of all time, and figures just in general. And he's a huge favorite. He's a -1250. He's fighting this guy, Manuel Palacio, and it seems to be a setup fight for him to get that first professional victory there. And, that's not a fight that I'm looking to bet. I've seen that line open up right around a -1000, go all the way to a -1300 on some of these books already. And that's something I want nothing with, but I'll be intrigued to see how Muhammad Ali's grandson looks. And then this is a fight I do want to talk about here a little bit more in depth. Aaron Pico is taking on Henry Corrales. This is a rematch. If you guys remember, Pico was knocked out by Henry Corrales. Back when Aaron Pico first got into the sport, he was a very young prospect. He was the hottest prospect really in the game at the time. Bellator got their hands on him. He has the wrestling pedigree, the boxing pedigree. I mean, he's a complete fighter, and he's a phenomenal athlete. He did lose in his pro debut, if you guys remember that. He got caught by Zach Freeman. I think he got caught and then he was eventually subbed, and it was a little bit of a fluke thing there. He was so over aggressive in those fights. Went on a nice little win streak there, and then he was knocked out by Henry Corrales, and he was also knocked out by Adam Borges. Just again showing that he needed to mature as an MMA fighter, needs to slow things down. He's obviously a phenomenal athlete, like I said, does all these things well. He has so much promise, but he needed to learn. He's still only 27 years old. And before he got knocked out by Henry Corrales, it's worth noting that he was in control of that fight, and I would say he would have won that fight if he just didn't get clipped, right? But that's part of the game. You cannot get clipped with the big shot. After those 2 losses, got some good experience, went on a nice little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fight winning streak, taking out guys like Aiden Lee and Justin Gonzalez. I believe Justin Gonzalez was still undefeated at the time. And then he had that loss to Jeremy Kennedy in between some other victories here. But that was a fight where he was injured, and I think he showcased his toughness in that fight. If you remember, his shoulder was dislocated, and he still wanted to go out there after the first round. I mean, he's an extremely tough guy. He fought through the first round. This kid, I guess we can still call him a kid, not even a guy. He's 27 years old. He has so much potential still. I think that he's a phenomenal fighter. He's a fight finisher. It's just he has been prone to being finished. That's the one thing with him. His chin has been tested. I expect him to get redemption in this fight. It's worth noting for sure that Henry Corrales takes this fight on days' notice. He's 10 years older now. All right, there's a 10-year age discrepancy here. Aaron Pico is going to be more conditioned. If this fight goes to the later rounds, he's going to be able to use that wrestling, in my opinion. He just can't get caught with a shot early on in this fight, or hopefully his shoulder doesn't give out again, and maybe there's some type of injury that goes on. Those are injuries that happen to come back in some of these fighters' careers as they progress. So hopefully the shoulder's all good. Now we take a look at the betting line here. Aaron Pico is a big-time favorite over Corrales. He's as high as a -550. That's what he's on my bookie. Open up at -500. It's obviously a high line, like I said. Guys, but I'll tell you what, man. I'm not going to fight with you or argue with you guys if you're throwing this in a 2-team parlay. I know it's a little bit of a degenerate move there, but I think Pico's going to handle business here. He has so many things going for him. You're just betting against he doesn't get caught with the first-round flash KO. And Corrales is a tough customer, man, but he's up there in age. I don't know. I would say the value, if I had to go one way or another, I'd say if you can get Pico at a -500, you could throw him in a parlay. I'm not saying that I really am standing on that, but I wouldn't argue with you guys if that's how you're feeling. I mean, you can go the other route too and say the value's on the veteran Corrales when you're getting a better line like that. I get it. I think Pico shows up, though. I'm telling you guys now. Now, for Pico to win inside the distance, I see this line right around -110. I will tell you guys this. I'm actually favoring a decision victory for Pico. I know he's a fight finisher, but Corrales has proven to be an extremely tough outing for anybody as far as the durability he brings to the table. This is not a fighter that gets finished easily. And you take a look, out of his 7 losses, 3 of them have come by way of finish, all from submissions. He's never been knocked out. I don't really see Pico pulling off that sub. He's a guy that really goes out there to get that knockout, and I just don't see him getting that submission, and therefore I see this fight going to the distance. Corrales is very tough and durable, so not really seeing value there. And if you're looking at prop bets, I'm looking more towards this fight going the distance or going over 2.5 rounds. Here we go. We got Clay Collard taking on AJ McKee. And let me just say real quick, I'm sorry if you ever see this video in the background being a little choppy. I'm working on that. I'm going to have that fixed here very shortly. But I definitely want more visuals for you guys behind me as I'm talking to you. That's something that I'm working on. I want to make the production of these videos much better. I've noticed that some of them have been choppy as of recently due to some of the tweaks I've been doing with some of the other stuff here on these videos. So just note that will be fixed if it's choppy for you guys. This is a fight that I'm very excited about. AJ McKee, you guys know I'm a big fan of his. I still remember seeing him, in the back of these videos when I used to watch his dad, Antonio McKee. I used to watch a lot of stuff in Antonio McKee back in the day. I've been around for a while, guys. I'm a longtime fight fan. Antonio McKee, a fighter that went on a crazy win streak back in the day. His father never really fought in the UFC that much. I believe he only fought once in the UFC, if I remember correctly. But Antonio McKee obviously taught AJ McKee from a very young age. I remember seeing him in the back of these videos. He was a little skateboarder kid, and he ended up growing up to be one of the best fighters on planet Earth. And you guys know that I'm always very high on these fighters that start off mixed martial arts at a very young age. But you know what? I'm not going to sit here and really praise AJ McKee like I have in the past, because his past couple performances haven't been that impressive to me, or they're not where I expected them to be with the growth that I expected to see from him as he matured as a fighter. He spent a great amount of time on his back against Sidney Outlaw. I know he was doing big time damage there with the elbows, but I don't like the way he's been on his back in some of these fights. Spike Carlisle put him down on the mat as well, put him on his back a little bit. Also, he's such an electrifying fight finisher, and he's diverse. He's like this new age type of fighter, but I'm not happy with where I'm seeing his boxing skills, as far as the technique in his hands. I'm not liking the technique I'm seeing with his boxing. His hands are coming from very far out east and west, and that could be a problem against a fighter in Clay Collard who has professional boxing experience. You guys know he's a very, very talented striker, and really he's elevated his overall MMA game throughout the last couple of years, specifically up to just what his striking and boxing game is. He's a well-rounded fighter, and I think that he's actually live in this matchup here. I do like AJ McKee to get the job done. I think that AJ McKee will just be a little bit more of a better athlete and just a little bit more of a diverse fighter, just looking for landing more impactful shots. I will say maybe opening up Clay a little bit, but I think Clay will be live to hit a counter shot. I'm interested to see if Clay goes to the grappling, goes to the wrestling, and tries to get on top of him a little bit. Maybe try to have some control time throughout this fight. This is an exciting fight for me. I am taking AJ McKee to win this fight, but I'm not really backing him, and I'm not raving about him like I have in the past. And I think that the line is slightly off here. I think there was more value on a Clay Collard plus 250 line or so. I'm not really targeting AJ McKee at a minus 325 line here. And then as far as how I see this fight playing out, if it's going to go the distance or we see a finish, AJ McKee has never been finished yet. He has that one decision loss. Clay Collard has 3 losses by way of finish out of 11. He's shown to be a durable fighter as well. I think this is a fight that probably goes to a decision. I think we see some blood scattered throughout the canvas. If we see a finish, I'm going to say this real quick, man, just be careful if we see a Clay Collard counter, as AJ McKee is being extremely aggressive, looking to get his own finish, and maybe Clay clips him with a nice tight hook. Just want to throw that out there in case it happens, but give me AJ McKee to win a decision. Thiago Santos taking on Yoel Romero, both fighters in their 40s. This is like a vintage Bellator fight, really, even though it's taking place under the PFL banner. Right, it's PFL Consume Bellator. This is like a Bellator fight here, and I'm not going to sit here and complain. I'll be happy to watch it. Could play out entertainingly, although we'll cut to the chase here. I do favor this fight going to a decision, and I actually think that this fight may not play out as excitingly as we would hope it to play out. Yoel Romero is a fighter that has been hesitant before in certain types of matchups, especially where he feels maybe he's a little outmatched. We've seen him be hesitant, even dating back to the Israel Adesanya fight. He was very hesitant in that fight. We've seen him perform like that in some of these types of fights. Took losses to Phil Davis and Vadim Nemkov as of recently. Now, Thiago Santos is a fighter that if you give him that type of matchup, he knows how to do just enough to edge out decision victories over fighters. We saw that in the Johnny Walker fight. That was the last victory that he had. And remember how that fight played out. It was a sparring match, but he did just enough. We know Thiago Santos has big power in his hands if he lands. But again, he has good speed, and he knows how to just edge out a decision victory. That's kind of the route I'm going here. You take a look at all of his recent losses. First off, the John Jones fight. A lot of people thought he won that fight. Whether you thought he won or not, he definitely performed well. He was injured in that fight, had some torn ligaments in his knees, and still showed up and took some rounds. And then you take a look at all his other losses. It's against all high-level competition. Jamal Hill, Magomed Ankalaev, Alexander Rakic, Glover Teixeira. Besides that Rob Wilkinson fight, that's the one fight that was a little alarming there. But Wilkinson was on some PEDs and stuff. And I don't know, man. Listen, Thiago Santos at 40 years old, that's a huge difference than a 46-year-old man in Yoel Romero. And I understand Yoel Romero's built very differently. This guy has phenomenal genetics. He still has huge traps. And I know he's not a typical 46-year-old, but Santos almost has a 3-inch reach advantage here. I have a feeling that this fight's going to go to a decision. I see Santos just edging out some rounds from the outside. Okay, that's the route I'm going here. Not really targeting any type of inside the distance or KO props. Thiago Santos opened up as a -125, minuscule slight favorite on my bookie. It's now -115. It's pick 'em odds. Slight action coming towards Romero. It's a pick your poison type of fight. And I like Thiago Santos here. I know he was put on his back by Rob Wilkinson a little bit, especially in that third round late in the fight. Maybe Yoel Romero can use the wrestling and dig deep here. But I think Thiago Santos comes in a little bit more motivated. He's younger. And I edge him in this spot here. I edge him out in a boring, maybe I shouldn't say boring, but not the most eventful type of fight. I think Santos does enough from the outside. Taking place in the heavyweight division, Bruno Capiloza taking on Vadim Nemkov. This is a fun fight. Vadim, the Bellator light heavyweight champion of the world. A lot of you guys know him as Fedor Emelianenko's top protege, right? I mean, this is without a doubt the top student that Fedor has groomed throughout the years. His brother Viktor Nemkov, also a good fighter, and he does everything very well. Does Nemkov? Nemkov is a very well-rounded fighter. He's looked phenomenal as of recently. Besides, maybe if you want to put an asterisk next to that first performance there against Corey Anderson before he won the rematch, which it was so unfortunate for Corey. Right, there was that headbutt. It was a no contest, and that was a fight that Corey Anderson was really in control of and would have won. But you got to love the way that Vadim fine-tuned some things, came back and won the rematch. Goes out there, defeats Yoel Romero, really dominated Yoel in that fight there, won 4 of the 5 rounds, arguably 5, I guess you could say, but definitely won 4 or 5 rounds. And he's looked good, man. He's looked good. And Bruno Capiloza is an extremely dangerous fighter. That's what you have to note here. If you're not familiar with Bruno, he's a knockout artist. Okay, that's what he does. 8 of his 15 victories, more than half of his victories have come by way of knockout. He's a headhunter. He's not really mixing up the kicks as much. Yeah, he has some kicks as well, but this is a fighter that's really looking to, touch your button with his knuckles. That's what he's doing, man. He's looking to land perfectly at the end of his shot and put you out. And we've seen him do that. Okay. Now, if you want to talk about anything that's a little alarming about him, again, he's coming into this fight off a failed drug test where I believe it was some legitimate type of steroids too. He was on some real performance-enhancing drugs. He was coming into a rematch against Matthias Scheffel, which he lost the fight before that. And Matthias really frustrated him in that fight. Matthias was getting the better of the striking exchanges. And I could see Vadim Nemkov doing something very similar to that. Also, I would say that Bruno has his resume is filled with more lower level fighters compared to Vadim's. I'm a little bit higher on the level of competition that Vadim has fought. There's a couple of notable victories here. The Croatian Ante Delaya is a solid fighter. He has 2 victories over him. He had a knockout and then a decision victory. Jamil Jones, not really going to go there with that. He was knocked out by Yuri Prohaska in the first round, so that we've seen his chin tested. That's one of the knockout losses that he's had. I believe he's had 2 knockout losses. Also was knocked out against Theodoras Akastulis, the Lithuanian fighter, I believe, over in Ryzen. Let's talk about the betting lines for this fight. Nemkov is a big-time favorite. Opened up as a -600, dipped all the way to a 700, and came back to a 550. All right. In my opinion, that line's way too high to be touching. Capiloza is dangerous. He's a good fighter as well, but he's very dangerous with his hands. He could potentially land a big shot that shakes things up. We saw Corey Anderson land some big shots and kind of took Nemkov's head out of the game in that fight there. Not saying I expect this fight to play out like that, but as far as where the line is, I just would not advise you to be targeting him in a parlay. I've looked through the available bets for this fight. The over 1.5 rounds is set at even odds there. It's really hard for me to put my finger on anything there. Where I will say I see some potential value for those of you guys that are looking for a value bet on this card. Maybe you want to target Capiloza to win inside the distance, which you can get as high as plus 575, almost 6-1 odds on Capiloza getting Nemkov out of there. It's a heavyweight match. Bruno's a fight finisher. He has heavy hands, and but even then, Bruno just is coming off a failed drug test. What version of him are we going to get? But that's really the only value I see as I look through the odds on this fight. If Nemkov came all the way down to in the -400s, that's the only way I would mix him up in a 2-teamer or something like that. The line's way too high for me where it stands right now. We got a catchweight match here taking place at 182 pounds. Jason Jackson taking on Ray Cooper III. Cooper stepping in for Magomed Kirimov. I apologize again about the video if it's choppy behind me. I will have that cleaned up. Just want to clarify that once again. Just want you guys to have that visual of the 2 men. Jason Jackson, the much more lengthy fighter here. we had the luxury of seeing these guys at the stare down, so I wanted to make sure I got that up here, but it will be cleaned up. Jason Jackson is on absolute fire right now. He is the Bellator welterweight champion, or was the Bellator welterweight champion, after he went out there and finished Yaroslav Amosov, a fighter that has never taken an L before that date. That was very impressive. But let's be clear, Jason Jackson has been a fighter that has really gone out there and has strung off decision victories. So it's kind of hard to say what kind of version we're going to get from him here. Is he going to go out there and look to get the finish all of a sudden again against Ray Cooper? Or is he going to kind of use his length and kind of style on Cooper from the outside, maybe change in levels? We've seen Cooper kind of frustrated in some of his more recent fights as well. He's taken some questionable losses too. He lost to Carlos Leo via decision, lost to an aged Derek Brunson. People joke about Michael Johnson being a hot and cold type of fighter. Well, I think you could throw Cooper's name in that mix as well, because Cooper has some nice victories. Knocked out Magomed Kiramov, defeated Rory McDonald. I know it was a shell of Rory, but still, it's a big name there. Knocked out Chris Curtis, if you didn't realize that. Victories over Jake Shield, had 2 knockouts over Jake Shields. So this is a fighter, if you're not familiar with him, Ray Cooper III is a very game fighter. I believe he is the cousin of Kai Kamaka III. If you guys remember, I had an interview with Kai Kamaka, a fighter who used to fight in the UFC. He's went over to Bellator. They come from a fighting lineage. Their all their families are just involved in the MMA game. Ray Cooper is a game fighter, but I think Jason Jackson is going to be a step ahead here, especially from what we've seen from the two men as of recently. Jackson will have an 8-inch reach advantage. He'll have that length in his legs to use from the outside as well. I can see him changing levels, using some grappling. He's been preparing for this date. I mean, all signs are pointing towards Jason Jackson. Let's be very clear there. But you have to be careful that Cooper can land a big shot, especially when you're talking about Jackson being a minus 700 favorite. It's not really a lot of value on that line, I would say. I mean, what are you going to do with that? He opened up as a minus 500. Big action's been coming in on Jackson. If we take a look at some of these prop type bets, the under 1.5 round is set at plus 230. I think maybe you could say there's some value there. Cooper is a hard hitter. Jackson hasn't been typically a fight finisher, but in his last fight, he was looking to bring the fight, and Cooper taking this fight on short notice, maybe he gets frustrated and finished. It's tough to say because Cooper's been pretty durable throughout his career as well. This is just another fight, man. It's frustrating. It's another fight on this card where we're talking about should be champ versus champ type status. We want to see these close lines. It's not really what we're seeing. We got a little bit of, we got sold some wolf tickets on some of these fights, but we'll enjoy it. Now, this is a fight that I'm digging here. All right, the co-main event, Johnny Eblen taking on Impa Kasanganay. Impa, a fighter that should have never slipped out of the UFC's grasp. We'll talk about that here more in a second. Impa's been fighting up at the light heavyweight division as of recently. He's bounced all around. We've seen him fight in the welterweight division, the middleweight division, the light heavyweight division. I think that he should stay in the middleweight division. He looked phenomenal on the scales and at the stare downs. Again, sorry if it's choppy again. Just want to say that will be cleaned up. But Eblen's been on absolute fire. He's 32 years old. He's been training over at American Top Team for some time. Has the wrestling background. His striking's come a long way. You hear nothing but rave reviews from him over at American Top Team, right? A lot of people feel he is the best middleweight on planet Earth, okay? And I'm not going to sit there and argue with you on that, too, if you believe that. Maybe he is. He might be the best middleweight fighter. I mean, he needs to come over to the UFC. He needs to take on Drakus if we want to talk that, or take on a guy like Sean Strickland, or a variety of other guys in that division. You guys know there's just so many great or solid middleweight fighters at the top of the peak there. But Impa, like I said, Impa should have never been let go by the UFC. He had an unfortunate little run where they let him go. I mean, he got knocked out by Joaquin Buckley, which was crazy, right? If you remember that fight, one of the most phenomenal knockouts we've ever seen. He bounced back. He got a submission victory over my boy, Sasha Palatnikov. Shout out to my boy Sasha there. He looked good in that fight against Sasha. Then he got flash KO'd against Carlston Harris, and the UFC was just ready to cut ways with him because at that time, you think about the Maki Patolo fight, the Anthony Adams fight. He showed to have a lot of promise, but he really wasn't going out there looking to finish fights. In the UFC, I've told you about how the UFC is. If you have those type of performances and then you lose one or two, they'll cut ties with you quickly. And that's what happened. Took an L over at Eagle FC after that as well. And then he finally got the train back on the tracks, defeating Jared Gooden. Got that knockout there. Started to show that fight finishing ability all of a sudden. Getting some knockouts on the regional scene, or excuse me, not the regional scene, getting a knockout over in PFL. And then he had the submission over Tim Karen as well over on PFL. Had a knockout over Marthin Hamlet. That was a nice knockout. You want to run the tape back on that. It's over on YouTube. A lot of his fights are on YouTube because the PFL and also Bellator is very generous with putting the fights right on YouTube. You can pull them up, watch them nice and clearly. But the knockout he had over Hamlet really showing evolution with his hands. Okay, so he's starting to peak as a fighter here. He comes off that decision victory over Josh Silveira. This is a fight I'm excited for. I think that the line's off. Johnny Eblen's a big-time favorite. I'm very high on Eblen, but I wouldn't be shocked if this fight is more competitive than what some people think that it is. Okay, so we take a look at the betting line. Eblen opened up as a minus 450, touch a minus 700, and then the line comes back to 450. So people are realizing that's a little much there. Okay, I like Eblen to win this fight. I like Eblen to be a step ahead, and I'll let you guys know this. I think I'm liking Eblen as far as possibly getting a knockout in this fight. So let's take a look at that prop because Kasangane's chin has been tested before. Now, you can catch it right around plus 215 for him to get a victory inside the distance. Not a crazy amount of value. I would have liked it a little higher, but that's something you want to keep an eye on if you're looking for some type of prop bet with a plus sign next to it. Okay, kind of like that a little bit. I think Eblen's going to bring the fight, and just I've seen Kasangane get starched. I've seen his body crumple before, and I think that's a possibility here. Eblen to win via TKO or KO plus 350. A little bit more value there if you're going more the TKO route, which is kind of the route I'm going. But Eblen's a phenomenal grappler as well. But even though he's a phenomenal grappler, he's a solid wrestler, really doesn't have any subs, just one submission. So I would probably take the plus 350 value if we're talking towards the prop. So give me Johnny Eblen to get the job done here. Wouldn't be surprised if he gets a KO victory. But also, if he doesn't get that KO victory, don't be surprised if Impa actually pushes this fight and lets it play out closely. All right. So if Impa doesn't get starched, I think Impa will show up and he'll have a decent showing. But Eblen still will be a step ahead. Here we go. We got legit champ versus champ going on here in the heavyweight division. We got the massive Renan Ferreira with the huge size advantage against Ryan Bader, a fighter we've seen jump back and forth from the light heavyweight and heavyweight division. Ryan Bader also 40 years old. Even though we know he takes very good care of himself, he's a fighter that's always been in phenomenal shape as well throughout his career. He's still 40 years old, is up there. Renan Ferreira, 34 years old, and more primed fighter as far as his physical abilities go. Has that size advantage as well, as we mentioned. So there's some interesting factors going on in this fight. I will tell you this much, though, man. Renan Ferreira, this is a fighter. He's coming off a couple victories, not necessarily so impressed with the level of competition. Dennis Golstov and Maurice Green. I mean, those were what it were. I like the Matthias Scheffel knockout a little bit better. But before that, he was coming off his own knockout loss against Ante Delija. Lost to Rizvan Kuniev. That was a fight that was overturned due to Kuniev testing positive for some drugs, some performance-enhancing drugs. And before that, knockout over Jamil Jones. You'll see that on a lot of guys' resume over in PFL. The Fabricio Verdum fight, that was a weird one, right? He really tapped and should have lost that fight from what I remember, and then ended up getting the finish. That was a tricky one. Submitted Jared Vandera. I don't know, man. Just this is a guy that's 12-3 as a pro. I think that this kind of shows the shallowness of the PFL as far as the heavyweight division goes. This is, I'm excited for this fight. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here, but don't get it twisted, right? You throw Renan Ferreira in the UFC and the UFC's heavyweight division, and I think that you would see a good amount of losses stringing off on his resume. Ryan Bader at 40 years old, I don't really think he's hanging around in the UFC these days either. When he was more primed, still, yeah, he would have. Of course, he was a phenomenal fighter throughout his career, but 40 years old now. I mean, he's going out there, knocking out an old Fedor Emelianenko, Czech Congo, Valentin Moldavsky, whatever. Got knocked out by Corey Anderson. Corey Anderson's a stud. I mean, you see what's happening when he's fighting legit fighters. All right, so got knocked out by Vadim Nemkov. It's just you got to understand what the record and what's going on, right? He's at a different stage in his career as well. So now I will say this. I am liking Ryan Bader here. I am. When I break down the tape on Ferreira, I see him on his back a little bit. I've seen him taken down. If you remember the Ante Delija fight, he was taken down. He was put on his back quite a bit, and he had a tough time trying to get up, and he was beaten down. He was ground and pounded, right? He was finished in that fight. I think that Bader still has that power in his hands. I think there's potential for something like that. Ryan Bader is a Division I wrestler. I think he wrestled over at ASU, right? Arizona State University. He has some serious wrestling in his back pocket. I think he can maybe change levels and get in on those huge legs and maybe trip him down. He could chop the tree down. He can get on top of him. I like Ryan Bader here. I like Ryan Bader, and he does have fight-ending abilities. I mean, maybe we see something like that. This is just another fight, though. It's a weird one for me. But I do like. I like the underdog tag next to Bader's name rather than targeting Ferreira at -133. Bader opened up as a -147. We've seen action going the other way, so I like that. I like going against the grain there, and I like getting that plus value. This is a fight that I think it's really hard to say how it's going to go. Maybe Ferreira, maybe you see that youth and that size really come into play, and he breaks Bader, and we see that Bader's really, looking to step away from the game at 40 years old, just looking to go more that route and see an end to his career relatively soon. It's going to be a weird one here. It's hard to really gauge, but I'm excited for the fight. I'm excited for the fight. It should be a fun one. Give me Ryan Bader. I'm going to say, can Bader get the finish here? When Ferreira loses, man, he is finished, right? He's been finishing all 3 of his losses. Bader has finished a good amount of his victories. 31 victories and 14 of them coming by way of finish, almost half of them. Can he get? If he's going to get a victory, it's going to come by way of a knockout. That's in my opinion. That's the way I see it going down. Can he land some ground and pound shots? I don't know, man. I think he's just so big, and it's going to be hard for me to see Bader getting him out of there. I could see Bader more controlling him and putting it on him there. Maybe he gets that finish, but it's tough to say there. But give me Ryan Bader. I like the money line. I like the plus money line next to his name. That's the value I see in that main event spot. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up here. Sorry this wasn't my best production. Honestly, guys, I got a lot of stuff going on over here in the back. I just wanted to get this video out to you guys. A lot of you have been asking me for this, and I wanted to get it out. This way I had my picks on record as well here on YouTube, and just sorry it wasn't my best production. I'm working on some things over here, and I got some stuff in my mind. But I appreciate you guys. I will be tuned in. I'll be watching all these fights tomorrow. I'll be watching all the UFC fights, and I'll be excited. If you're new to the channel here, check out my UFC Mexico prediction video and understand that usually my product's a lot better if you're new and you just found me because you were searching this different organization over here. But I appreciate all you guys. Like the video, subscribe. I hope you guys all have a wonderful weekend.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.